On 5th July 1948, Nye Bevan, the Labour government's health secretary, opened the first National Health Service hospital at Park Hospital in Manchester. It was the culmination of years of work bringing universal free health care to the UK. In Scotland, during World War II, a massive government-funded programme of hospital building had taken place, and half of Scotland was already covered by state-funded medical care. In the Highlands and Islands 35 years earlier, the Highlands and Islands Medical Service had been set up, and in 1935 the Air Ambulance Service began. It is also worth noting that Scotland was dominated by medical schools rather than the English private practice system, and as early as 1946 the Scottish NHS Bill was ready for Parliament, but delayed. Bevan simply created a nationalisation of an existing service in Scotland, but he brought the system under one umbrella, with free healthcare for all. In 1948, all these hospitals were incorporated into the new National Health Service. One such hospital was Airthrey Castle Maternity Hospital at Bridge of Allan, near Stirling. Airthrey Castle was a mansion house that had been designed by Robert Adam in 1791 for estate owner Robert Haldane. In 1891, the front entrance was rebuilt and ornate wooden panelling was installed. By this time, the house and the estate was owned by Donald Graham, a partner in William Graham and Company, East India Merchants of Glasgow. Graham died in 1901, but his widow, Clara, remained until she leased the estate in 1924 to ship owner Charles Donaldson. He lived there until his sudden death at the castle on 7th December 1938, aged 68. In 1939, Dr. E. Neil Reid, Medical Officer of Health in Stirling, was charged with setting up an emergency maternity hospital under the Department of Health for Scotland's Emergency Evacuation Scheme. It noted that there was room at the Donaldson home. Dr. Reid later said Donaldson's widow, Grace Glenn, was a joy to work with, as he set about clearing the bedrooms. One of the large bedrooms became the maternity room, and next to it was a bathroom which doubled up as an examination room. Planks were laid over the bath, and this created the examination table. The castle took delivery of around 25 beds and equipment, including crockery and cutlery, and opened its doors for the first batch of mothers on 12th September that year. The first baby born at the unit came on 15th September to a woman originally from nearby Bridge of Allan, who had been evacuated back to her family there. Dr. Eva Taylor Cairns, a local general practitioner who worked at the maternity unit at Stirling, accepted overall clinical charge of Airthrey. Other staff included a matron and a sister who was a qualified midwife. There were also 2 registered midwives and 2 auxiliaries. Mrs. Donaldson also played her part in helping to run the hospital until she left in May 1941, when her lease was up. She was later awarded an MBE in the 1951 Honours List for her work with hospitals, and was a member of the Stirling and Clackmannan Hospitals Board. She died at her home, Home Hill, in Dunblane, on 14th October 1967. In 1940, there were just 43 confinements, as most mothers had their babies at home, and the hospital was purely for evacuees. This led to a discussion about closing the unit. However, in 1941, following the bombing raids on Clydebank, the hospital came into its own, as it was taken over by the government, and its administration fell to Stirling County Council. With Mrs. Donaldson leaving, this allowed the 5 to 10 bed unit to increase to 40. The maternity unit saw over 2,000 births by the end of 1945. Infant mortality rates were below the national average, and it was recorded that 3 mothers lost their lives during that period. Many of the mothers-to-be arrived a week or so before their due date. Most were from Clydebank, with the rest made up from evacuees from England and Wales who were living in the surrounding areas. Staff were key to the smooth running of the hospital. On one occasion, the cook suddenly upped and left, but one of the staff nurses took over and cooked for the patients, a job she did for the next few years. On 31st March 1946, the hospital was bought for a little over £30,000 and handed over wholly to the council, by which time there was a full-time consultant. The rest of the estate was sold by the Grahams to developers the following year. The maternity units at Falkirk and Stirling were overflowing, and Airthrey was a good addition to take the strain. A year later, it became a training facility under Dr. Donald Gregg, after Dr. Cairns left to marry John McLaren. In February 1948, Dr. Elizabeth Margaret Rose, a graduate of the University of Edinburgh who specialised in gynaecology and obstetrics at the Old Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford, took up the position of consultant and lived in the castle for some time following her appointment. There were 2 beds in the labour ward at this time. The matron was Miss Clark, and the 2 sisters were Miss Taylor and Miss Bunyan, plus there were 2 student midwives. With the birth of the NHS in July 1948, the hospital came under the auspices of the Western Regional Health Board. When it was handed over, it had evolved into a 31-bed unit and training school with a consultant, with staffing levels at the highest it had ever seen. Soon afterwards, word came through that much of the land was to be sold off, with the exception of Airthrey Castle and its immediate environs. During Dr. Rose's time, there were between 580 and 700 births per year, with Dr. Gregg being the expert with forceps and breech births. Blood and plasma were kept in the fridge for emergencies, and although Dr. Rose mainly worked at Stirling Royal Infirmary, she held clinics at Alloa and Falkirk, and only attended Airthrey on Tuesdays and Sundays. However, a blow came in 1964. On 17th July that year, it was announced that the first university to be built in Scotland for 400 years would be constructed on the Airthrey estate. Morale at the hospital slowly deteriorated. The gardener and the cook retired, and the bulldozers came. The greenhouses were dismantled and replaced by temporary offices. The delivery of babies continued in this rather subdued mood. In 1967, the university opened for students, and in 1969, Airthrey Castle Maternity Hospital closed its doors a few weeks after the new maternity unit had opened at the nearby Stirling Royal Infirmary on 16th September. In all, around 15,000 babies were born at Airthrey Castle Hospital during its time as a maternity unit. The castle was Category B listed on 5th September 1973 and is still used by the University of Stirling.